chapel was so quiet you could hear hearts breaking. Every pew was filled with mourners paying their final respects to Sergeant Jackson Walsh, his flag-draped casket a solemn symbol of everything they'd lost. But no one was ready for what happened next. As the Reverend began his eulogy, a sudden shift in the atmosphere gripped the room. Major, Jackson's loyal military K-9 partner, bolted from Captain Rodriguez's control, his leash slipping through fingers that had held it tight just seconds before. Gasps rippled through the congregation as the German shepherd sprinted down the center aisle, his claws clicking against the stone floor, eyes locked on one destination. With a powerful leap, Major landed on the casket, his body trembling, nose pressed urgently to the polished wood. He sniffed, circled, then let out a soft, broken whimper, the kind of sound that doesn't come from an animal, but from a soul in mourning. And then, something changed. Major stilled, his ears perked up. His tail gave a hesitant wag, the first since Jackson had been injured overseas. It was as if, in that moment, the dog sensed something the rest of them couldn't. Something invisible, something sacred. The weight of grief hung in the air like fog. Sarah Walsh, Jackson's sister, sat frozen in the front row, tissue clutched tight in her fist, her breath catching as tears streamed down her cheeks. Her mother Diane whispered through trembling lips, "He looks peaceful, just like when he'd fall asleep on the couch after training." But this peace was different. It was final. Sergeant Jackson Walsh had served with distinction for 12 years. He wasn't just a decorated soldier. He was a son, a brother, a friend. And for Major, he had been everything. Captain Rodriguez, standing at the back of the room, clenched his jaw. He'd lost soldiers before, part of the job, but Jackson had been more than just another name in the roster. They'd shared missions, scars, and silent battles few would ever understand. "I'm not sure this is a good idea," Sergeant Freeman had warned earlier, eyeing Major. "He deserves to say goodbye too," Rodriguez had replied softly. Jackson would have wanted that. For 5 years, Jackson and Major had been inseparable. 2 tours in Afghanistan, countless lives saved, a bond forged in fire. When Jackson was critically injured by an IED, Major had stopped eating for days, his spirit fractured by the separation. Now, as Reverend Miller spoke of duty, sacrifice, and service, Major knew. He felt it, the energy, the absence, or maybe a presence. Just moments before the leap, Rodriguez had noticed the tension in the leash, Major's muscles twitching, breath quickening, ears locked on the casket like radar. "Captain," Freeman had said with concern, but it was too late. Major was already moving, drawn by instinct, by love, by memory. When he reached the casket, the world seemed to pause. The room didn't breathe. Major placed his paw against the wood and pressed his head down. A silent farewell from a warrior to his fallen brother. Sarah sobbed quietly, watching the scene unfold. Something in her shattered and healed at the same time. This wasn't just grief. It was loyalty, proof that real love, real connection doesn't end with death. It lives on, even when everything else is gone. Tears streamed freely down Sarah's face as Captain Rodriguez instinctively stepped forward, ready to retrieve Major from atop the casket. But then a calm voice interrupted. "Wait," Colonel Harrison said gently, raising a hand from the front pew. "Give him a moment." No one moved. The air in the chapel was thick with emotion, silence clinging to the walls like mist. Major whimpered, a sound soaked in confusion and longing, then gently pawed at the wood, lowering his head onto the casket, ears perked, as if waiting for something or someone. Then it happened. Major's head lifted sharply, his body tensed, his ears stood upright, eyes locked on nothing. At least nothing anyone else could see, just empty space beyond the casket. But the dog's focus was razor sharp, as if tracking something invisible to the rest of the room. His tail, which had been still for months, gave a single hesitant wag. "What's he doing?" someone whispered from the pews. Sarah leaned forward, her heart pounding. Something about the dog's behavior had shifted. The despair had faded. In its place was recognition. Major's tail wagged again, more confidently this time. "He sees something," Diane whispered, her voice trembling. Then Major let out a soft whine, not one of grief, but one filled with joy. The exact sound he used to make when Jackson would walk through the door after a mission. A sound of homecoming, of reunion. He stood tall atop the casket, tail now wagging steadily, eyes tracking something unseen by human eyes. Sarah felt a chill spread down her spine. "Jackson," she whispered, barely audible. Major barked once, sharp, sure, then gently lay back down, head on his paws, eyes still alert, still watching. The air in the room shifted. There was no denying it. Something had changed. The grief still hung heavy, but now it was laced with wonder, a feeling that defied explanation yet touched everyone present. Rodriguez and Freeman exchanged a look. Both were battle-hardened veterans. Both had seen things in the field they'd never been able to explain, and both now felt something they hadn't expected to feel in a chapel. Awe. "I've heard stories," Freeman murmured, "about dogs sensing things we can't." Dr. Nicole Parker, the military veterinarian who had overseen Major's recovery after Jackson's injury, quietly stepped beside Sarah. "Their bond goes beyond what we understand," she said gently. "Some working dogs form connections that can't be broken, not even by death." Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving Major. "They were always connected," she whispered. From the first time Jackson brought him home on leave, it was like they could read each other's minds. The memory rose clear in her mind. Jackson in the doorway, dusty and tired, smiling proudly with Major by his side. "This is Major," he'd said. "Best partner a guy could ask for. He's already saved my life. Twice." Even then, the devotion in the dog's eyes had been unmistakable. Back in the chapel, Reverend Miller hesitated, unsure how to continue with a German shepherd stretched across the casket. But Colonel Harrison stood up once more. "Please," he said firmly, "continue the service." I think Sergeant Walsh would have wanted his partner right where he is, and so the service resumed. But the room's attention remained divided, half listening to the Reverend's words, half transfixed by the dog who never looked away from something only he could see. When it came time to share memories, Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. His voice, usually clear and commanding, trembled slightly now. "I met Jackson 8 years ago, back when he volunteered for the military working dog program. He told me he understood dogs better than most people." Rodriguez paused, glancing at Major. "He worked with a few before Major came along. But when those two met, something just clicked." Sarah smiled faintly through her tears, remembering Jackson's video calls, how he'd talk about Major endlessly. He'd describe training, missions, obstacles, but he always came back to the same thing: pride, love, loyalty. "They saved 37 lives during their tours together," Rodriguez said. "But numbers don't tell the real story. The real story is what you see here today. That kind of bond, it's rare. It's something you don't forget." As he returned to his seat, Sergeant Freeman stood up, pausing to rest a hand gently on Major's back. The dog's tail thumped once in response, though his eyes never strayed from the unseen point he was still guarding. "Jackson told me once," Freeman began, "that Major wasn't just a partner. He said, 'Tommy, that dog knows me better than I know myself. I swear he can read my mind before I've even had the thought.'" He chuckled quietly, his voice cracking. "I didn't believe him. Not then, but watching them work, I became a believer." Freeman's tone dropped lower, heavier. "There was one night in Sandoval province. Patrol nearly walked into an ambush. None of us saw it, but Major did. He froze, refused to move. Jackson didn't question him. He trusted that dog without hesitation. Turned out there were explosives buried ahead. Major saved all 12 of us that night." Sarah noticed Major's ears twitch at the memory. He'd relaxed a little, his body less tense, but still vigilant, still watching, still waiting. When Sergeant Freeman finished speaking, A profound silence settled over the chapel, broken only by the soft, steady sound of Major's breathing. Then, unexpectedly, a quiet voice rose from the back. It was Private Kevin Torres, the young soldier assigned to Major after Jackson's injury. "I never met Sergeant Walsh," Torres began, his voice firm but respectful. "But taking over as Major's handler, it's like I gotta know him through the dog. Every command Major follows, every instinct, every bit of discipline, it's Jackson's legacy. Still alive, still working." At the mention of his new handler's voice, Major turned his head briefly, acknowledging Torres with a glance before returning his focus to that unseen point beyond the casket, the same invisible presence that had held him spellbound since he leapt onto it. Their connection, Torres and Major, was still new, fragile, nothing like the unbreakable bond Major had shared with Jackson. But Torres was trying. "I used to find him at the same spot every night," Torres continued, "right by the barracks door. 2100 hours on the dot, the exact time Sergeant Walsh would come home. He'd carry Jackson's old t-shirt from his crate and just wait." In the front pew, Sarah pressed her hand over her mouth, trying not to sob. Her mother, Diane, squeezed her daughter's hand tightly. The service continued, stories shared of Jackson's sarcastic humor, his quiet strength, and the fierce loyalty that defined him. Through it all, Major remained atop the casket, a silent, vigilant guardian. Occasionally, he would lift his head, ears twitching, responding to something unseen, something only he could sense. When it came time to leave for the cemetery, Captain Rodriguez approached, unsure what to do. Major hadn't moved. "Major," he said, voice firm, slipping into the tone used during training. "Come." The dog didn't move at first. His eyes lingered in that same mysterious place beyond the casket, as if listening to someone still speaking. Then, slowly, Major rose to his feet. He stepped off the casket with a grace that felt almost ceremonial. But instead of going to Rodriguez, he walked straight to Sarah. He pressed his body gently against her legs and stood still. Sarah looked down, tears brimming again, and whispered, "Good boy, such a good boy." As the pallbearers approached to carry Jackson's casket, Major remained close, eyes alert, his body tense, as if still protecting his fallen partner. Whatever had passed between man and dog inside that chapel, whatever silent exchange had taken place, it wasn't over. It was only beginning. And now, if this story has touched your heart, we ask you to subscribe. These stories take time to tell right, and your support means everything. Now, back to the final chapter. The funeral procession moved slowly through Pine Ridge, black cars crawling forward beneath the bright afternoon sun. Despite the clear sky, headlights were on. Silence ruled. In the lead car, Sarah sat beside her mother, hands tightly intertwined. Major rode with them, a decision made personally by Colonel Harrison after witnessing what had happened in the chapel. "I've never seen anything like it," Diane whispered, glancing at the German shepherd seated perfectly still beside her, his eyes locked forward on the hearse ahead. "He's not looking at nothing," Sarah said quietly. "Not to him." They rode in silence, the sound of tires on pavement the only reminder that time hadn't frozen. Jackson used to say Major could sense things other people couldn't, joked he had a sixth sense for danger, for truth. At the sound of Jackson's name, Major's ears twitched, but he didn't move. His posture was rigid, focused. Only the occasional tremor in his powerful frame betrayed his grief. "Do you remember?" Diane asked suddenly, a faint smile forming through her sorrow. "When Jackson told us he was joining the K-9 unit? Your father was so proud." Sarah nodded. "Dad would have loved Major. He always said dogs see people for who they really are." As the hearse turned through the wrought iron gates of Greenwood Cemetery, the line of cars followed solemnly. The cemetery grounds were beautiful. Soft green lawns stretched under towering oaks, flags marking the graves of fallen soldiers fluttering gently in the wind. Ahead, a military honor guard stood in perfect formation. 6 soldiers in formal dress uniforms waited to carry the casket. A 7th held a bugle, its brass shining in the sunlight, waiting for the final notes of taps. "I don't know if I can do this," Diane whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of goodbye. Sarah squeezed her mother's hand tighter. "We'll do it together." "For him." In the back seat, Major whined softly, pressing his nose to the window as the hearse came to a stop. His body shook with restrained emotion, but he stayed put, discipline etched into his muscles. Sarah opened the door slowly. Major stepped out, not lunging, not pacing, but his gaze never left the hearse, and his feet moved with silent purpose, as if drawn toward it. Captain Rodriguez met them as they approached. "Mrs. Walsh." "Sarah," he greeted, voice heavy but respectful. "If Major becomes disruptive," Rodriguez said quietly, "Private Torres can take him aside." Sarah looked down at the dog sitting faithfully by her side. Major stood at perfect heel, unmoving, focused, despite the quiet tremble that occasionally passed through his frame. "He'll be fine," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "He needs this, just as much as we do." Rodriguez nodded slowly, his expression softening. "Jackson would agree with you." Together, they walked toward the burial site, a green canopy stretched above the grave to shield mourners from the midday sun, rows of chairs arranged in neat formation beneath it. Major stayed in sync with Sarah's pace, his steps precise, deliberate, exactly as he'd been trained. Occasionally, he'd glance to the side, not in distraction, but as if tracking something no one else could see, before returning his attention to the casket. The honor guard moved like a single unit, lifting Jackson's casket from the hearse with practiced grace and placing it onto the lowering device. The flag still draped across it, red, white, and blue, vivid against the green grass. As Sarah and Diane sat in the front row, Major settled beside them, his posture rigid. His eyes moved between the casket and the empty space next to it, the same invisible point he'd been fixated on since the chapel. Reverend Miller stepped forward again, his words carried gently on the breeze. "Earth to earth, ashes to ashes, dust to dust." But Sarah couldn't hear the words. Not really. Her eyes were locked on Major. Something about him was different. He wasn't grieving like before. There was alertness now, like he was listening to someone just out of sight. Then came Colonel Harrison. "Sergeant Jackson Walsh served his country with honor," the colonel began, standing tall in his dress uniform. "He embodied everything we hold sacred: courage, commitment, and sacrifice." He paused, then looked down at Major. "The lives he and Major saved overseas are a testament to their bond, a bond forged not just in war, but in unwavering trust." Sarah's mind drifted back to the day Jackson had called from Fort Bravery, practically vibrating through the phone with excitement. "I got paired with the best dog in the program, sis. His name's Major. You should see him work. It's like he can read my mind." She'd laughed then, teasing him like always. But the first time she'd seen them together, in person during his leave, she understood. The way they moved together, the way Major responded before Jackson even gave a command, it had been something deeper than training. It had been unbreakable. Colonel Harrison's voice brought her back. "In accordance with military tradition, we now present the flag to Sergeant Walsh's family in recognition of his faithful service." Two members of the honor guard stepped forward. With precise, deliberate movements, they folded the flag, 13 folds in total, each one symbolic, each one final. When finished, a soldier handed the folded flag to Colonel Harrison, who turned solemnly toward Diane. "On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service." Diane's hands trembled as she accepted it. Her eyes overflowed as she clutched the folded triangle to her chest. Sarah reached over, wrapping an arm around her mother. At their feet, Major watched intently, his head tilted, his ears lifted. And then, as if on cue, he straightened, his back going ramrod straight, standing not just in respect, but in something deeper, as if receiving his own unspoken command. The honor guard stepped back, and then came the moment Sarah had been dreading. The rifles rose. Major didn't move. Crack. The first shot of the 21-gun salute echoed through Greenwood Cemetery. Crack, crack, 7 rifles, 3 volleys, a soldier's farewell. The sharp sound reverberated across the headstones and between the trees. Many dogs would have flinched, bolted, trembled. Major didn't flinch once. His training held. But more than that, his focus remained locked on that same unseen space, always watching, always waiting. As the final volley faded into silence, the lone bugler raised his instrument. The first haunting notes of taps filled the air. Day is done, gone the sun. Sarah heard the melody in her bones. Her father used to hum the words to her as a child. Now it felt like a farewell to everyone she'd lost. Major's ears twitched. He let out a low, soft whimper, not from fear, from understanding. He knew what this sound meant, and when the final note lingered and fell into stillness, that was the moment. The casket began to lower. Jackson's body, his presence, slowly descending into the earth. The moment Sarah had feared the most, the goodbye no one could undo. Suddenly, Major rose. His movements were slow, deliberate, not panicked, not confused, but full of intent, as if it was time. Major's sudden movement caught Sarah off guard. She didn't have time to tighten her grip on the leash. But he didn't lunge like he had back at the chapel. Instead, he stood perfectly still, watching as Jackson's casket was lowered into the earth. His body trembled, barely, but he held his ground. And then, with a precision that sent chills through the crowd, Major lifted his right paw, a silent salute. He held it there, unwavering, as the casket disappeared from view. A collective gasp rippled through the mourners. "My God!" Captain Rodriguez whispered, his composure cracking. "I've never seen him do that before." Dr. Parker, standing nearby, leaned in and added softly, "He wasn't trained for that. That's not part of his command set." But still, Major held the salute for several long seconds. Then, slowly, he lowered his paw, turned his head towards Sarah, and looked at her with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of everything unsaid. Eyes that spoke of grief, loyalty, and a goodbye that words couldn't touch. As the formal ceremony ended, mourners began to approach Sarah and Diane, offering hugs, whispered condolences, and gentle touches to Major, many recognizing him from Jackson's stories or the photos he'd shared with pride. Private Kevin Torres approached quietly, his face somber. "Ma'am," he said to Sarah, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Sergeant Walsh was a legend in our program." Sarah nodded, her throat tight. Torres knelt beside Major, who glanced at him politely, but quickly returned his gaze to Sarah. "He's different now," Torres admitted. "Since we got the news, he'll follow commands, but there's no heart in it. Today's the first time I've seen him present in weeks." Sarah blinked, the question forming in her mind before she even realized it. "What happens to him now?" Captain Rodriguez, who'd stepped closer, answered gently, "Normally, military working dogs continue service. They're reassigned to new handlers. Major was assigned to Private Torres. But the transition hasn't been easy." Sarah looked down at Major, still leaning against her leg like a shadow that wouldn't leave. The thought of him deploying again, facing more danger without Jackson, it didn't sit right. "He's only 7, Dr. Parker added, joining the conversation. "He could serve several more years, but what?" Diane asked, her voice quiet, the folded flag still clutched to her chest. Dr. Parker hesitated, then spoke the truth. "His behavior since Jackson's injury has been troubling. In human terms, we'd call it depression. His performance has declined. He's lost his drive." Sarah dropped to her knees beside Major, running her hand through his thick coat. "What are the alternatives?" she asked, though her heart already knew the answer it wanted. Rodriguez took a breath. "In certain cases, families of handlers can adopt the dog. It's rare. There's a process. But exceptions can be made." The moment he said it, something shifted inside Sarah, like a puzzle piece snapping into place. "I want to adopt him," she said firmly, her eyes meeting Rodriguez's. "If that's possible." Rodriguez nodded. "I figured you might. I already started the paperwork. Just in case." Major looked up at her as if he understood every word. He turned, glanced toward Jackson's grave, then back to Sarah. "There's a process," Rodriguez said gently. "Evaluations, home visits, handler certifications. These dogs are highly trained, but given the circumstances, he belongs with family," Diane interrupted, softly placing a hand on Major's head. "Jackson would have wanted that." As the cemetery slowly emptied, Sarah remained seated, not ready to leave her brother behind. Major stayed with her, unmoving, watching, and every now and then he would tilt his head, his ears twitching toward the same empty space he'd been following since the chapel. Captain Rodriguez returned one last time, this time accompanied by Sergeant Freeman. "We're heading back to base," he said. "Private Torres can take Major, or he stays with me," Sarah said quickly, "if that's allowed." Rodriguez nodded. "Given everything, yes. At least until the adoption is finalized." As they spoke, Major suddenly rose again, his entire body focused on the grave. A soft whine escaped him, but it wasn't one of fear or sorrow, it was recognition. As if he heard a command only he could understand. He stood tall, still, listening. Then his tail gave a single slow wag. "There he goes again," Freeman whispered. "Just like at the chapel." Sarah felt the hair rise on her arms despite the warmth of the afternoon. Jackson always said their connection went beyond words, beyond reason. And now, she finally understood what he meant. As the sun dipped low over the cemetery, Sarah finally stood. Major rose with her, calmer now, as if a weight had quietly lifted from his shoulders. "Come on, boy," she whispered. "Let's go home." He followed without hesitation, pausing once to look back at Jackson's grave. Bathed in golden light, he stood tall, the very picture of loyalty and courage. Back at the Walsh family farm, Sarah parked the car in the gravel drive. The white farmhouse and red barn hadn't changed, but the presence of Major, Jackson's partner and protector, made everything feel different. "This was Jackson's home," Sarah said softly. "I guess it's yours now, too." Major jumped out, immediately surveying his new surroundings. On the porch, Sarah's 10-year-old son Ethan appeared. He froze when he saw Major. "Is that Uncle Jackson's dog?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "This is Major. He's staying with us." "For real? Forever?" "That's the plan. But remember, he's not a pet. He's a trained soldier." Major, surprisingly gentle, took a step toward Ethan and sniffed the air between them. "He knows who you are," Sarah realized aloud. Ethan's voice was a whisper. "Can I pet him?" "Slowly," Sarah said, then used one of Jackson's old commands. "Major friend." Immediately, Major's body relaxed. He stepped forward. Ethan extended his hand, and Major pressed his nose gently into the boy's palm. "He likes me," Ethan beamed. Later that evening, as the sky darkened and the family settled in, Major explored the house like a soldier clearing a post. When he entered Jackson's old bedroom, he paused, sniffed, then laid down on the rug beside the bed with a deep sigh. No commands, no hesitation, just instinct, just memory. That night, Sarah invited him to sleep beside her bed. "I miss him too," she whispered into the dark. Major crept close, his breathing calm and steady, the sound of silent comfort. In the pre-dawn stillness, Sarah awoke to find Major at the window, watching something outside. His tail gave one soft wag. Then he returned to her side, eyes peaceful. Whatever had called to him in the night, it had passed. Days turned into weeks. The adoption was approved. Major adjusted, not by forgetting his past, but by finding new purpose. With Ethan, he trained daily, combining military discipline with boyish games. He wasn't just Jackson's dog anymore, he was family. Months later, when Major helped intercept a suspicious man in town, later revealed to be a wanted criminal, everyone saw it. Major hadn't just come home. He was still serving. And then came the letter, a hidden message from Jackson, stored in Major's vest, discovered by chance. In it, Jackson warned of something wrong overseas. He'd trusted Major to deliver the truth, and Major did. His instincts exposed the threat, confirming Jackson's suspicions, and bringing justice one last time. At Jackson's grave 1 year later, Sarah, Ethan, and Major stood together, a family forever shaped by loss, but no longer broken by it. Major placed his paw gently on the headstone, a final salute, and when they walked away, he turned forward, not looking back this time, as if to say, "Mission complete, let's go home."